Welcome to Men Making a Difference, PGSAO men who inspire and motivate.
Franklin Shelton, how are you today?
Good afternoon, State's Attorney Braveboy. I'm doing well. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. I was so excited when I heard that I was going to be interviewing you because I know that the cases you deal with are very interesting. They're not sort of the typical cases that we deal with every day here in terms of the assaults and the auto thefts and other things. You deal with some very specific and unique and really highly technical areas of prosecution. So why don't you tell our viewers about your role in the office and the type of cases that you handle?
Sure. So I'm the chief of the Special Prosecutions Unit, and our unit handles cases ranging from arsons, financial crimes such as embezzlement, identity fraud, and felony theft, also including environmental crimes such as large-scale dumping and littering as well. We also handle motor vehicle manslaughter cases and life-threatening in cases, crashes involving life-threatening injuries such as amputations or damage to organs that may cause that person to have to undergo some medical intervention to try to ensure that he continues living, something that is going to impact their one of their major organs, things like that.
Absolutely. So those serious bodily injury and death cases, I want to kind of start there. The motor vehicle manslaughter cases, unlike other crimes where oftentimes you have defendants who have been in the system before, with our motor vehicle manslaughter cases, both the defendant and obviously our victims in most cases have no criminal record. Sometimes this is their first offense or first serious offense. How do you feel prosecuting these types of cases, and what are some of the challenges that you face as a prosecutor when having to decide how to handle, let's say, a motor vehicle fatality case where you have a defendant who this is their first time coming into contact with the justice system?
Okay. Well, I'm also working on Vision Zero, which is a collaboration with other agencies within the county, but that's kind of helped inform what we see, as you know, on a daily basis in terms of the high number of fatal crashes in Prince George's County, the high number of, there's a significant number of DUIs as well, and the roadways, just like we have a large portion of the Interstate 95 and a lot of state roads that lead through the county, and there are just opportunities for like large crashes. They're densely populated areas. Some areas don't have sidewalks, so there's some interaction between motorists and pedestrians there as well. But one of the main things I really think about is, as you've described, this can really happen to anyone. I mean, we've had prosecutions where, young, toddlers, were killed, just celebrating the holidays with their families, or someone coming home from work. Sometimes, you have a friend, like it may be, from the perspective of the at-fault driver, like, someone in his car, like a good friend, they may be coming from a sporting event, oftentimes in the fall, and now it's raining as well. Like those are environmental factors that also may make the likelihood of a fatal crash, when people are speeding, more likely. But, just seeing, people, it can happen to anyone, strike anyone, people just, going to or from work or on their way to work, they're hit by someone who is driving in such a manner that, they're showing no regard for the life, of others or their own life for that matter, at high speed. There may be alcohol impairment involved as well. So they're challenging because the penalties for motor vehicle manslaughter, assuming that even if it results in a successful prosecution, and if this person has no, enhancements, no prior DUIs or anything like that, the maximum is 10 years. And, when you tell a family that has lost a loved one, or, through no fault of their own, and the person may have been drunk or drugged at the time, that, the maximum sentence is 10 years, and that they may only do maybe 25% of that, that can be very upsetting. It doesn't register. Sometimes people don't think about this, as much as like homicides and robberies, but, the idea of the motor vehicle manslaughter and the associated penalties are much lower. It does represent, the fact and reflects the fact that these are not intentional homicides. Yes, the person did make a number of conscious decisions, such as, whether it's, drinking to the point of intoxication, then getting their keys and going out on the roadway and putting the lives of others at risk. Is still not, not an, intentional, and that's reflected in the law. But, that's hard. Like, that's a hard discussion to have, and to understand, that,
Right.
This is someone that may have had children or not, but, they had people that cared about them. They'll never get to see them again. It's very hard. Like, it's, in terms of, just trying to seek justice and just do what we can, to help them, that brings them some closure in terms of prosecuting the case. The other challenges, we have to, we work closely with the law enforcement partners, to try to collect the, evidence needed. Often that is in the form of blood evidence that may reveal, whether that person, had, certain levels of drugs or alcohol in their system at the time, as well as, whether they have what's sometimes called a black box or an electronic data recorder that's often pulled during the course of an investigation to learn information such as the vehicle's speed at the time, like maybe 5 seconds leading up to the crash, gas pedal position, whether the airbags were in operation, whether the airbags deployed, if so, how many airbags deployed, and whether there was indication that there was anyone else in the car, so we can make sure we have an understanding of who was driving. Like, that's one of the challenges is, proving that a, crime occurred, obviously, and then that this person who was near the car or may have been taken to the hospital for treatment, that this person was in fact driving. So that takes time, to do that. The investigator has to review the roadway evidence, interview witnesses, if any, from 911, calling, reviewing the 911 records and, the medical records, and, we evaluate the case with the other members of the unit and determine the appropriate charges. So the challenges really are just kind of collecting evidence and just, determining the appropriate punishment, for those cases, in light of the fact that, someone lost a life. That's always, it's a very humbling, challenge. It's a, we don't take that lightly.
Yeah, no, I really, those cases are the toughest. And, I've been with you, and we've spoken to next of kin, both before and after trials. And, we've been able to obtain, justice in our cases. And I'm grateful to you and your team, because we do excellent work. But the reality is we can't bring their loved ones back. The amount of time that we can seek often does not seem like justice for them. But then again, you often have, again, defendants who have not really had a lot of contact, if any, with the justice system. But in most of our cases where there is a loss of life, we're talking about a homicide or something else where there was a real intentional act. So these cases are very difficult, but I think we do a phenomenal job, not only of trying the cases, or, we often enter into pleas because the at-fault driver will admit guilt, but also then on the back end, trying to make sure that we connect the families with services that they may need in order to move forward with their lives. So I really appreciate that level of care and concern that your unit, along with our victim witness unit, puts into those cases. You know, excuse me, I want to talk a little bit about the arson cases because you do handle those as well. Again, a very specialized area of law. In those cases, you have some very unique, oftentimes, type of defendants in those cases. So you want to talk about who you typically run into in those cases?
Okay. Sometimes, especially now during the COVID, and I'm trying to determine why it seems more pronounced now. I don't know if it's due to certain organizations that may have assisted people, maybe the homeless population, or people that may be struggling with mental health challenges, or are downsizing, or no longer in existence. But we sometimes see situations where if someone is non-compliant with medication, and they, may be, intentionally setting fires, multiple fires on some occasions, and then just sit by, and sit back and observe the fires. That, obviously is a concern for, life and property. Sometimes these are multi-use dwellings. Sometimes it's in an open field where they just kind of light something and just, just watch the fire, grow and so forth. But that has been a challenge. We kind of see that, like there's sometimes transient individuals, or, their parents oftentimes were the principal caregivers, but, the parents sometimes, in a few instances I'm thinking about, they may be older and they may themselves be like in a care facility. And so, you have an adult who is not compliant and really is not hooked up, or with any services. And the only way, unfortunately, I've seen that is sometimes when they are charged, defense counsel will rightfully seek some type of competency evaluation, and a number of them are pending in state institutions where they're receiving treatment and and appropriate medication. And that's one of the challenges I see here, is that and I would like, as we've talked offline before about maybe a mental health court and a circuit court side to kind of divert some of these cases where they can get intensive supervision and be teamed up with some people that specialize in mental health care. That's one of the main things I see in terms of the arson cases.
Yeah, and it's really important that we as prosecutors or state's attorneys not only look at what is effective strategies to prosecute people, but we also look at what are effective strategies to deal with underlying issues that impact our communities. Because what we would like is for the arson never to have occurred at all. But in order for that to happen, we need to connect people with the appropriate mental health services and other community-based services that they need. And so being able to identify those and identify real solutions, I think is important for us as prosecutors. So it's great to have people in my office like you who kind of understand that role that we have to really, that's part of preventing crime, not just prosecuting it, but also preventing them. Now, again, we talked about how how varied the issues that your unit deals with, but how highly technical all of what you deal with is. So let's move on to financial crimes because they can come in various forms. But what are some of the typical types of schemes or scams or types of prosecutions that we do involving financial crimes? And can you talk about the volume of just like paperwork that those prosecutors or those prosecutions involve, and how highly, kind of technical some of the statutes are related to these to financial crimes? Because I think people are more likely to be impacted by a financial crime than even a violent crime, but oftentimes those crimes don't make the headlines in the media.
So you're right. We've handled cases recently, like some of the prosecutors here in the unit, involving like a financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult. Sometimes you have a person in a position of private trust, maybe a family member or guardian, that essentially may misappropriate funds intended to serve as a basis to to provide for the the food and maintenance of the ward in the case, and they use it for unrelated expenses, ranging from their own vehicles or artwork or something like that, just unrelated to the care and maintenance of the individual, the victim in the case. And once we, again, working with different county agencies, we sometimes get this information from family members, from Adult Protective Services may send referrals, and in working with the Financial Crimes Unit with the Prince George's County Police Department, we'll do some grand jury work to identify bank records to kind of, basically the task is to follow the money to kind of show what was going into the bank accounts, who had access to it, and ultimately what was done with the money. That's going to be really critical, as well as staying and working closely with the victim in the case, because oftentimes these there can be family members, as I've indicated, and it may be challenging to get someone who's in that position of trust to like to have them be willing to cooperate and assist, in terms of, helping us, and provide us with the information we need for a successful prosecution, just in terms of being motivated, because they may not report it or may be reluctant to, cooperate, in that, for some time, and just continue to be victimized, but we try to reach out and engage in public education, with members of the community, different organizations, to kind of share various scams, like Social Security scams, and as I've said, these financial crimes here. But we typically look, it'd be like theft or financial exploitation, and it's primarily going to be driven by most typically like a review of the bank records, and conversations with the care providers, and kind of tracking it in that fashion. We also have some crimes involving people using fake fake documents to obtain cars, and we'll again have to work closely with the involved like banking or lending institutions, car dealers, and so forth. Again, getting the records, so surveillance footage if necessary, to put forth a successful prosecution in those cases as well. So it kind of it typically consists of records from financial institutions, and just kind of going over it with the investigators to make sure we can provide an accounting for that money, like outside of that the shared account, and perhaps to another account, so that we can identify the people who need like warrant prosecution.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is sometimes very difficult to make those cases, but where we are, and we do, I think, a tremendous job. And when we're able to get justice, our victims are very grateful, very thankful, because their expectations are low when it comes to financial crimes. They don't think anyone cares, or that it's going to be too difficult. And even if we're able sometimes to, hold the person accountable, sometimes they're unable to really recover their losses. Because if that person's in jail, they're not able to work, and so they're not paying them back if they can't recover either their, the money or anything that was purchased with the money that they could actually, sell or whatever. I mean, it's just really tough. But I think ultimately people just want to know, does someone care? Does someone believe me? Am I being taken seriously? And I think that we take those cases very seriously. So it's really great to have you and your team do this work, which is very important. I know that you also mentioned that we are involved in illegal dumping. That's a huge issue in our county. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Sure. Yeah, you're right. I mean, even on my Nextdoor app, that's one of the topics that drives a lot of conversation, and it is very frustrating. You could be at a traffic light and somebody will just, take their fast food bag and just, open their door and drop it.
Right.
That's on a smaller scale, but then, you have people that may dump hundreds of tires in in an area slated for new development. And yes, it's very frustrating. And, working with different county agencies, we are trying to aggressively prosecute those, offenders, to identify them. They're using different techniques, in terms of surveillance and so forth, to identify those crimes and to effectively prosecute them, to ensure that they're held accountable, and that we, deter those individuals, as well as any, people in the general population that may consider doing that. But it represents a challenge and an opportunity as well to educate, because it does impact the quality of life, and it's very important. Like I said, it drives, and it's maddening, because you could wait, go to the, like to one of the appropriate facilities, a landfill,
Right.
or you put it curbside or whatever, dispose of it properly. So, and it's, that's, what we're doing, just trying to identify those. I should have mentioned too, our unit is a vertical unit. So we work at the initial, stages of the investigation to try to work with the law enforcement, partners to evaluate cases, do grand jury work in terms of, and maybe consider expanding the scope of an inquiry, doing search, using search warrants to try to, collect and gather information. But we've worked early on with that, with these different law enforcement partners to try to effectively prosecute all these various types of crimes. And environmental crimes is similar. We meet, try to discuss, some of the problem areas in the county, and try to brainstorm about ways to effectively, discourage dumping, and also ways to effectively, prosecute them as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So look, I know we don't have that much time left, and I really want our viewers to kind of get to know you a little bit. So can you tell us what or who influenced you to become a prosecutor, and also just, any advice you might have for individuals either interested in becoming lawyers, or hopefully some of them might be interested in becoming prosecutors?
Okay. Well, I started off as an assistant public defender. And I enjoyed that work. And as I've heard some of my fellow prosecutors say, I enjoyed it, but I also, and what essentially influenced me was a prosecutor. It was a prosecutor I really admired. He was very even-keeled. He didn't mind you asking questions. I try to always be approachable. If a defense attorney, or anyone, they have a certain perspective, or on the case, or they think there's some information I didn't adequately consider, that I should consider in terms of charging or sentencing considerations. I try to always be open. I don't want to make anyone uncomfortable, as I think is sometimes the case, by even just having a conversation about the case. I always try to maintain professionalism and hear people out. I mean, we may not agree, but I want people, regardless, even that includes the defendant, like, to feel that, they were giving a fair, effective prosecution. So regardless of how things shake out, if they find themselves in prison, they may have some complaints, but they can't complain about the way that the state, through, our unit has treated them, because we do our best to ensure that, we fulfill our obligations in terms of discovery and just our decorum and the way we, conduct ourselves. I think that's important. So,
Yeah, absolutely.
To this prosecutor, I just kind of really admired the way he did things. And he also was a public defender initially as well.
Oh, wow.
Which and so it was in another state, another jurisdiction. But what kind of turned me was that I realized I was doing good and, as a public defender. But as he said, a public defender or any defense attorney, they may have just a portion of the cases that you would handle as a prosecutor. So while you
Right.
can do good on a greater scale as a prosecutor. And I also felt that some of the things I saw, like I did see plenty of issues and so forth, you know, in terms of like, you know, how I would exploit things or raise things as a defense attorney. I thought that my personal temperament and skill sets would be best suited to kind of help, you know, like to ensure that, you know, the police are using sound methods, you know, to the extent possible. But you know, you have that conversation. I think that as a prosecutor, you have a greater opportunity to kind of share your perspective and have it, you know, kind of be, you know, taken, you know, more seriously in some, you know, circumstances. You could sit down, evaluate cases, you know, and
Yeah.
explain why these are challenges and so forth. So, you know, to make a long story short, the idea was that I could do greater good as a
Right.
prosecutor. I enjoyed the work. I enjoyed helping others. You know, you really realize, you know, like as as we were saying offline, but, you know, everyone has a right. Like I sometimes say, like, you know, people have a right to, you know, hopscotch or, enjoy their yards and so forth. You know, people have a right to, you know, and they shouldn't have to use people's different zip codes to, you know, go into it, you know, get a good school or anything like that. I feel that we should, you know, exercise the same care and attention in every neighborhood. And I try to bring that to bear, like with each, you know, case that we handle in terms of, you know, the importance. You know, I try to
Right.
treat them, you know, all similarly. They're all similarly situated, and they need to have our best effort. So that's what kind of really, you know, impacted me. I enjoyed the work. I enjoyed helping people, and I thought that I would have a better platform to do that as a prosecutor. And I thought it would be good to have someone, you know, with my background working as a prosecutor, you know, from the perspective of, you know, people that are in the court and the, you know, potential jurors. I mean, I think it's important to have diversity of thought, diversity, you know, in terms of, you know, beliefs and views and so forth, and perspectives, you know. So, you know, I
Yeah.
think that, you know, all of that helps make for a better unit and
That
a
that
better, yeah.
Yeah, that does. And I'm sorry we're running out of time, but it's just so great to hear the passion that you have. And I know that the people in our community understand that they are being well served by our office. And if they have to, unfortunately, if they're a victim of a crime that your unit handles, they know that they're going to get first-rate service. And if they are defended in those cases, they know that they're going to get fair treatment. And I think that's all anyone can really ask for. So thank you so much, Franklin. You have been amazing. Thank you so much for sharing what you do in our office with our viewers. And I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.